Today we are doing another couple code and we are looking into Spring Security with JWT. And for this one, fortunate for us, day of recording is May 2023. So now Spring Boot has done away with WebSecurityConfigurerAdapter. So that has been deprecated as of this recording. We are now looking into the security filter chain. So we're going to start a diagram of how authentication happens in Spring Boot and to get to JWT and getting our bearer token so that we can authenticate all our requests and protect our APIs and backend services. So where this starts is on the HTTP request. You have a couple of methods that you can execute to get post, put, and delete, and based on what the client or the user requests from the backend server via your APIs, they would hit one or a number of security filters that you would have in place, and based on your security configuration, which we'll see now in the code base, it will run through all of these filters: cross-origin resource sharing, CRFS, SF, and JWT filter, and any other custom filters that you will have in place on your code to make sure that the requests that you're getting are clean and what you expect, and from sources that you actually do trust and you give access to. So that is part of the filters that you would have. And then once the filters run through and all of them have sanitized the request, and then you would get to the authentication part, where then your credentials will be passed in, which is the request object, and the request object will be passed into the authentication manager, where you can also utilize a number of authentication providers based on your preference and based on your use case. You can have a DAO authentication provider. You can have a number of custom providers that you would want to implement in your code, and based on those implementations, the authentication manager will know which one to pick up and which one to use to retrieve the user details, make sure that the user exists and they're authenticated, they're still enabled, they're not blocked, they are not restricted in any way, or even get the authorities for that user, the roles that they are assigned to, so that when it comes to role-based access control, that particular user can only access the endpoints that they're given the role or assign the role for. So once the authentication provider comes back with the user details and the authorities, which access level do they have, the authentication manager then is able to come back and say, okay, now I have a response for you, this is a valid user, and now we can sort of continue with the JWT authentication filter to actually generate the token and then respond back and say, okay, now the user is authenticated. Go back and say whatever request that they were running, they can either get a 200OK, a 201, a 204 to say that everything ran through fine according to the request that they made, or if they are not authenticated, then they will get one or two responses, which is a 401 unauthorized or 403 based on the credentials that they use, and then they can obviously maybe change the password here and there and address the issue at that source. So essentially, in a nutshell, this is what it looks like, and this is the inner workings of how Spring Security works internally to make sure that all your requests are sanitized, authenticated, protected, and your backend APIs are safe in that way. So now we're going to go deeper into the code and see how we can get this done with the latest Spring updates, and hopefully you can plug that into your code base going forward. So let's go and see that quickly. We're going to start in the string initializer, and obviously, as you would know, guys, with any type of a Spring feature that I present, I take it through the initializer first, and these I'll actually attach the link on the description below so that you get the source code as is, and also you're able to get the dependencies that I have here, and you just plug and play. So please be aware that I am using PostgreSQL, so that's still fine. You can just change this one to a DB that you are using, but the rest is what you're essentially going to need to be up and running with this project. So it's the artifact name, obviously Spring Secure. So this is just tutorial for Spring Security with JWT, and I'm just using Java 11 because that's what's compatible with my machine. And obviously, if you are on the latest Java version, then that's fine. You can just update that and you should be good to go. So right, and now here I do have the APIs ready, but let's go into the code base, and we'll see when we come back to test these. So the first things first, couple of packages here, not a lot on this project, so let me just do this on my filter. Let me say okay, and it's gonna remove those ones that we don't need. So let's do let's check the root package. So this is the obviously the main class, and here I just described two beans, which is the password encoder, and I'll just default that to bcrypt, and that will be fine, and it should be available for us on our application. And then the other one is just me defining the user details. I am giving it a default user, which is just that. So we just test it with user and password, and everything should be fine. And that's just it. And I do add a component scan here so that it knows where to pick up my various components and scan them for me, and everything should be set up then. So I have my two beans here that I would need going forward, and everything looks good. And then the other package is for my controller. So I am using one controller, and in my controller, as you would see, I have a get mapping here, which just gives me a string, welcome to zip code, secure API. So this one is secured because everything in the project is protected, and you will see now when I show you the end matches in the configuration. So this mapping here, the login one, is actually allowed, so it's permit to all, and that looks fine. And this is the only one that we can hit from external or with an anonymous user, and then we authenticate the user. Once they have their token, then we give them back the token at this level here. So nothing much here. I just take the Spring user, which is an entity that I created, and that's the only thing in my entity package. So if you check here, this is my Spring user. I didn't even add an entity because I didn't want to add the database as yet. Just want to simplify it for you guys. So this will be string username, password, and then implement user details, so that I'm able to get a couple of things. But even the implementations here, you will see that I haven't done anything. I haven't touched any of these yet. I only call the implementations, and that's it. But obviously on your code base, you'd add your logic here to retrieve the details as you would need them on your application. So that's not a big issue, and also we'll discuss this later as we go along with the series, so that's not a problem. So for now, just pay attention to username and password, and that should be good enough for what we're trying to do here. So that's basically what we're going to get from the request body, which is our Spring user, and we're going to take that and push that to an authenticate function. So if we go look at authenticate, You'll see here we have a username and password, and then we call the authentication manager, just like we said in our diagram. We call our authentication manager that will do the authenticate for us, and we say username, password, authentication token. So you'll see that just before we instantiate this class here, which is username, password, authentication token, just before that we have a JWT filter that we have that will run before this is instantiated and does the authenticate for us. So in the home controller, that's essentially what we have. And once this is authenticated and everything looks good, we come back here and we say user details dot load user by username, and then we pass in the username that we got from the request, and then we say JWT token generate token, so that will give us the actual JWT token. Then we push that into a map, and once it's in the map we send it back to the user so that they can get their token and start using that. So essentially, if you're in Angular, you take the token, you put it on a session storage or local storage, wherever you want to set it, and then on your Angular side you just call the token whenever you would have interceptors obviously doing that for you, where you would then say, okay, the HTTP interceptor for every request that goes through, passing the token in the headers, and then all your subsequent requests will be authenticated once the filter gives you a thumbs up, and that's how it will be. And then going forward from here, I think we can just dive deeper into the inner workings of how are these requests then protected and not protected, and all of that stuff. So this one is not protected, but this one is protected. So let's have a look at that. So in the security package, which is the one that is much more interesting, and this is where your magic will happen. So you have just 4 classes that you would need, but you can cut down if you don't need some of them, like my authentication entry point, which throws an exception on the filter check. So this one is a custom one which implements the authentication entry point, and then it will run a comments here, and then it will throw an authentication exception, and will just let you know that you're unauthorized if there's any issues with your credentials and so forth. So this is just a smaller class that you would write. Yeah, all the other ones will be much more than this one. So let's just check the security configuration before going to the other ones. So our security configuration, we do plug a few classes here. So we have the entry point, and we have user detail service, and this is the default one, guys, because I want to simplify this for you, and it's going to be as simple as can be. So you can just use the user detail service, but obviously when you using your custom dedicated user detail service, you'll just implement this one into your custom detail service, and then do the logic on your use case. And then what the other thing that we have is the JWT request filter, and you'll see that this request filter, we do use it as we go down. So this is the password encoder. The password encoder that comes in here is the one that we instantiated in the beginning here. So the bin is already available here, so we'll just use it in our config, and that's it. So that will be available at the runtime. So now what we need is a bin for our authentication manager, because we need the authentication manager to authenticate our user. So we set a global config, and in previous versions, as you would know, or if you're new to Spring Boot, that's still fine, but this is the way to go going forward. So in the previous versions, what you would do here is to implement web security configurer adapter. So obviously that has been deprecated, so even if I call it now, it will just show you that it has been deprecated, so we're no longer using that anymore. And now we are going with security filter chains that will add the filters that we need for us. So the authentication manager that we need, we're going to set a pin for it, and then we're going to pass in the authentication configuration as we need. So then we pass the configurers that we want globally, and that will be a list, and then we say configurer.add a global configuration adapter, which will then override the configure function and will give us a authentication manager builder, and we set whatever we need to set as according to the auth that we have. And obviously that will be the user detail service and the password encoder, which knows the username and the password, and then you do the encoding and decoding of the password, and you will get the correct user when you log in. So that's what we have now, and then obviously you return the authentication manager from your config, and this is how we basically are going to be doing it going forward, and up until the next security update with Spring Boot. So this is the way to go, and this is how I would advise developers to look at updating their security configs. And then going further into the introduction of the security filter chain. So now we have a filter chain which takes the HTTP security, and then it will basically set all the filters that we need. So we have the cross-origin resource sharing, and we have all of the security filters that previously you still set them the same. There's nothing much that is so different. It's just that there we are now using the security filter chain instead of the web security configurer adapter, which is something that has been enhanced. And then going forward, we basically disable the CSRF. Yes, that's the one. So we disable that, and then we say authorize requests, and we say end batches, login and sign up. We want to permit everyone when it comes to these two endpoints. Basically, this will be a login and a registration page where users can be able to register and log in, so they will have access to that. But anything else, it should be protected, and this is where we tell you that any request is authenticated, and exception handling, we pass that to an authentication entry point, which will then take care of the exception that we throw at this level here, or at this filter here. So then this is the class that I was telling you about, which is this one here, zip code authentication entry point. This is the one that handles the exception for us, and you can basically do your own logic here to handle it the way that you want, which is not a problem. And then we say so session management, so we're going forward to the session management, and we want to say the session creation policy, it's stateless obviously because we have JWT, and then we are saying, okay, after our stateless session we want to have a filter before we get to username password authentication. So this one will say, okay, before I instantiate the username password authentication filter, I have a JWT request filter, and if you saw our diagram, there are a number of filters that are in place just for you to get authenticated, and all of those filters come at a different point in time, and that's how the authentication is then completed. So it's going to run JWT request filter, and then it's going to run the username password authentication filter, and then once everything has run through, it's going to say, okay, return a security filter chain that we have built up so far. And then once we have that, we're able to then give the user their token, and then they should be able to run all other requests. as they should. So here we also have a course configuration bean, which then just allows everything. So for now, I've just allowed everything because I'm testing on my local, so I don't need to worry about calling it from Angular, calling it from anywhere. I'm just saying if I'm testing this, everything should be green lights and I should be good to go. And essentially that's it on the configuration, nothing much, just minor changes here and there, and just these two beans that are now being introduced. So the rest, yes, nothing much. So we do have the annotations here that we would also need to make sure that you always have these so that your API is actually protected the right way. So secured enabled, role-based enabled, post enabled, pre-post enabled. So we make sure that throughout the life cycle of a call or a HTTP request, everything is protected going either way, either to the server or back from the server. So that's one thing that you would need in place there. And that's it about the security configuration. So what we want to do is check the JWT request filter on what happens there. So when that is called, let's go to JWT filter. So a JWT filter will make use of the JWT token util, which will then generate the tokens for us. So when we get here, it's going to do a filter internal, we get the request and the response, then we get the filter chain. And then that we go and get the request header, which is the authorization that actually has the token itself. And then we check if there is a token, we make sure that the token, if the token is null, or the token is empty, or it does not start with a bearer, which is not a bearer token, just do filter chain and return. So the chain to do filter chain will handle the exception as we need, and then we just say return. So it's gonna handle all of the exception, throwing the exception and whatnot, and then we just return. We don't want to do any other of the heavy lifting because it's unnecessary for us. And then if this is not true, then what we want to do is take the token from the request header, take the token, and then get the username from the token. So we use the token util here, which is this class here. So if you see here, I do have a number of methods. And also this implementation here, we do have a latest implementation like JWT decoder, claims validators, and all of those. So the next version of Spring Security, which I will be releasing soon, will also be on the latest update on the JWT itself and what changes are there that are new that we can use going forward. So you can see all of these functions that I have here are just for me to get username from token, get expiry date from token, get claim, get all claims from token, is token expired, generate token, and then generate refresh token. And all of these are actually very essential for a JWT token. And also the code base, if you do need it, please do comment down below and let me know your email address, and then I will share the code with you and you'll be able to pull it and run it on your side and just change it here and there to fit your use case. But it's free and it's available. If you want to make use of it, just let me know and I will share it definitely with you guys. So that's that. And so this is how the JWT token util looks like, and everything looks fine here. And going back to our filter, so we say on the util, just get us the username from token, then we pass in the token itself, and then we get the username. Once we have the username, we can then get the user details for that particular username. We get the user details, and then we say user value object, then validate this token. Is this token valid according to this user? Then if we get a thumbs up, then we say username, password token, and then we do a get at the authorities and everything that we need for that particular user, and then we pass that, we set the details as new web authentication detail source, and then we build from that particular um, username, password, authentication token, and then we pass that to the authentication context, which then carries the principal, carries the authorities, and carries the user details in the principal. So this is what we have, and everything looks good. Once we get to this point, everything looks good, and then we say chain, do filter, and then again it takes care of everything else that needs to run within this filter. Make sure that there are no exceptions, there's nothing that failed, and then once this is done, the user gets their token and everything runs through, and then you are able to run your server, run your APIs with protected requests, and you know that only people that have the right access to um, each particular endpoint, like we have here, only those users are able to access your application and able to play around with your application and perform certain tasks on your application. So on the code base side, that's all you need. Just a few classes here and there, probably 3. Yeah, if you're taking this one out, you can definitely move this, I think, and you'll just have the JWT request filter, security configuration, and then you will have a JWT token util. So those 3 classes, and then you'll have your controllers, how many ever controllers you want, that should be fine. And this is all you need for your Spring security going forward. So this is, as I said before, this is the recording on May 2023. So after this, the way that you'd want to authenticate Spring applications or Spring backend APIs is by following the same method here or logic here, and your API should be safe and secured according to your preference. And then the last thing is for us to test all of these. Let me run it in debug mode. That way it gives us, we get to see the different breakpoints as to when what happens when. So now we're just gonna test these. But one thing that is also good is that I want to show you guys is this. So this is a sign up, and there is no sign up endpoint as yet. So what I want to do actually now, the application is running, so that's fine. I want to go back to home controller, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it here right at the end, and then I'm going to say this is sign up. Then I say I'll just say register new user. Right, so this is get registration. That's what I'm gonna call it, and then we save this. So it's just gonna update right now. So that's fine. I'm just gonna make all of these like get. No problem with any of these. And obviously these can be moved to like a service implementation class, and then you just call it when you need it, and that's it. But for now, just to make it easier, it's still fine to be to be where it is. So we do have a sign up now, and we do have a login, and then we have a get, which is just a generic get. That's fine. So this one should be protected, and these two should be open. So let's put this to the test and see our application. Let me see here. So this is a get. I'm just gonna let me just do this. Okay, let me just take this request here. I'm gonna add another one here, and I'm gonna do sign up. So let's start with the login. So the login, as I've mentioned, that the user by default is user, and the password by default is password. So I'm just gonna send these, and then you see it comes through. Now it's on our JWT request filter, which you already have here, and we say, do we have a token? And let's see, token is null. As you can see here, token header is equals to null. So it's just gonna do a filter, and then it's going to ignore the rest of the stuff, and obviously going to throw this, but we are authenticating, so it will just continue with authenticating the user, making sure that all the details are there. So here we get the load user by username, and then we get the token, and we set the token for the guy. Because we're in authentication here, that's still fine. Now we got the token here, so we're just going to leave this token, which is fine. We got the token, but now if you go here and we do not pass in the token, now look what's going to happen. Let's just do that. Now we come back here. Do we have a token? Let's check here. Token is null, and now we are doing a get on the generic one. Now it goes into our authentication entry point. Like we mentioned, that it's the one that handles the exception. So when we just continue and we go back to application, we did get a 401. And if you go back to the diagram, you'll see that we do expect a 401 or a 403 if we do get an exception, and that is happening as you can see there. So now we're gonna go to sign up, and we're not passing anything, and now we're just gonna say sign up, and again it comes back here. There's no token, so the token is null, and we run it through, and we come back here, register new user, and we did get a 200. Okay, because at this point we do not expect any token to be passed in for this endpoint, like we mentioned on our end matches here. For authorizing requests, we said open login and open sign up. So here we did get a request, we did get a response, which is what we are expecting, but here we did get a failure. So now let me pass in the token, which is the one that I have from here, from our login. Let's just set that there, and let me run this and see. Now we're back. Let's see what we got our token, and let's see that, boom, bearer, blah 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 blah. So that is the token that we got, and let's just run this, and now we got that. Validate the token and run that, and do filter chain and run that, and now let's check our application. Welcome to zip code secure API. And basically that's it for this video, and guys, please do like and subscribe, and please do stay tuned for more content like this, and how you can better understand Spring and grow in your backend development and delivering highly secured, highly scalable, and high performance APIs. And until next time, do enjoy. Cheers.